We'll just give Councillor Craven a moment to get on. There he is. Welcome, Dennis. All right, so now that Dennis is here, I'll call this meeting to order. And thank you all for coming on this snowy day. I know it was terrible traffic for a lot of you. I know Clerk Wheeler and I talked about canceling the meeting because of the weather. But he prevailed and said he was already here, so I had no choice. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Let's move on to confirmation of minutes. The three of you are going to be busy. Councillor Martin has sent in his regrets. I do have a resolution here that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on January 12th, 2021 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda package. Moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas. All those in favor? That's carried. Do we have any matters arising under the minutes? I don't believe so. We have nothing under the Planning Act. We have a delegation today. We have from County of Wellington Climate Change Mitigation, Karen Chisholm. Karen, are you online today? There she is. Hi, Karen.
Hi, good afternoon. You can hear me okay?
We can, Karen. You're on and you're going.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for welcoming me today. Over the last year and a half, about 18 months, the County of Wellington has developed a climate change mitigation plan. And in this plan, we look at energy use in the community, as well as the greenhouse gas emissions from that energy use. And we provide some recommendations for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from that energy. Today's presentation will provide you with an overview of the project and how the county and the member municipalities can work together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So with that, I will attempt to share my screen. Okay, you're able to see the first presentation slide?
We are, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So we'll begin just by talking about some of the climate change effects that we may see in the future and some of their impacts. And I think most notably, and what we will visually see the most and what people may be most familiar with are the changes in temperature and precipitation. So when it comes to temperature, it's predicted that we'll see an increase in the average annual temperature, as well as an increase in the number of days annually above 30 degrees. And this is significant because this is when we start being concerned about the health impacts of these higher degree days and sustained higher temperatures. On the precipitation side, we'll see an increase in average annual precipitation, shorter return periods for extreme events, increased storm intensity, and increased freeze-thaw cycle. And some of these items, I know our conservation authorities are looking at and modeling what that means to our rivers and flooding and things like that. So how these changes may be felt. First, well, we looked at infrastructure, agriculture, environment, and recreation, although there are other areas in which climate change may be felt. When it comes to infrastructure, what may result from these changes are road washouts and erosion, increased insurance cost, power outages and service disruptions, road closures from a result of erosion and flooding, and water main breaks. In agriculture, what we may see is an expanded range of pests as our local habitats become more hospitable to some of the foreign pests and pests that are here, but maybe prefer a longer, the habitat that will be developed. So some of these pest infestations may result in lower crop yield, as well as some of those precipitation and temperature changes. We can also expect to see increased erosion on our agriculture fields. Out in the environment, natural heritage areas, we'll see ice damage to trees, which we have seen in recent years, increase in invasive species for the same reasons as we'll see an increase or expanded range in pests, increase in nutrient and sediment in our waterways, and a lot of that comes from erosion and flooding into those waterways, and an increase in algae, where we're not seeing that algae die off through the winter because the temperatures just won't be cold enough for that to happen. Recreation side, and this is where particularly municipalities, the local municipalities may have more interest. The cost of running some facilities like ice rinks may be more expensive. We'll see a decrease in opportunity for outdoor winter activities like skating and ice fishing, as we won't have that sustained cold to develop the suitable ice for those activities. And we may see low water during the summer drought. So what is climate change mitigation? In climate change, we're really looking at two things, mitigation and adaptation. And for this plan, we're specifically looking at climate change mitigation, and that is the intervention to reduce sources of greenhouse gas or avoid the unmanageable. And climate change adaptation is adjustments to natural or human systems in the face of new and changing environments. So how do we adjust what we do in response to the changes that we expect to see in climate change? In other words, manage the unavoidable. So as I said, for this plan, the county's been working on, we're looking at climate change mitigation. The plan followed the Federation of Canadian Municipalities milestone framework. There are 5 milestones, and we looked at the first 3 milestones. The first one being an emissions inventory and forecast. The second one is setting a target, and the third is actually creating a local action plan, which includes recommendations to meet the target. Through the development of the plan, we worked with a number of people. There was about 480 individual engagements, and we had a steering advisory group, which was made up of representatives from each of our member municipalities. And Sam and Tina has been wonderful providing us feedback from the Township of Mapleton. We also had a community advisory group. Community advisory group was made up of a number of community groups, as well as members at large, members of the public that had applied to partake in that group. And they represented local engineer or energy providers, conservation authorities, the Wellington Federation of Agriculture, and a number of other groups were represented in that group. We also had a number of working sessions with local industry leaders, and Patty Wright from Mapleton provided some excellent feedback and has offered to continue sharing her knowledge with us, which was greatly appreciated. So the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, what we looked at was on the community side was 4 areas: buildings, transportation, solid waste, and agriculture. In buildings, what we're really looking at is our use of electricity, natural gas, propane, and fuel oil in the community. In transportation, focusing on gasoline and diesel. In solid waste, we're looking at methane production from our landfill. In agriculture, we looked at enteric fermentation, manure management, soil management, and the application of urea and lime. So the second step was to set targets, and for the targets, we looked at the top-down approach of, what agreements are already in place at the federal and provincial level. So the Government of Canada has committed to the Paris Agreement, which is a 30% reduction from 2005 greenhouse gas emissions level by 2030. And they've also recently said that committed Canada to reaching a net zero by 2050. And Ontario also has supported the Paris Agreement with the 30% reduction by 2030. Partners in Climate Protection, which is the program under Federation of Canadian Municipalities, provided a guideline of 6% reduction from the baseline year over 10 years. Our baseline year we chose was 2017, and really that's because we had the most complete data set at the time the project started. So these are things that we took in consideration. We also took in consideration the recommendations that were achievable within the time frame of the plan. And this plan is scheduled to go from 2022 to 2030. It takes a village to work on climate change. Everyone has a role to play. We tried to bring as many of those community players to the table through our our community advisory group, and to generate some of these conversations that need to happen about who does what and how do we get all this done together. Specifically to municipalities, I think there are some specific things that municipalities can do. There's about 44% of greenhouse gas emissions, which are under the direct or indirect influence of municipalities. So municipalities do play a very big role in working on reducing greenhouse gases. For example, some of the things that we spoke about in the community advisory group was green building guidelines. So these guidelines would set some standards beyond the Ontario Building Code for new buildings to meet, and they would improve energy efficiency beyond the Ontario Building Code requirements. We also spoke about local climate action plans. So similar to this climate change mitigation plan, some of the member municipalities expressed interest in creating local action plans, and those guidelines or recommendations in those plans would be specific to municipal jurisdiction that is slightly different from the county, so we can have more specific actions in each municipality. There's also community incentive programs that I think the municipalities can play a big role in. There's a number of different approaches out there that need to be investigated to find something to suit, because we know that investment in climate change, it does take an investment, and sometimes to get the community to achieve that, we do need some incentive to get that done. Also, community engagement. Municipalities are closest to the community, and so it's important to understand each community's needs. Each of our municipalities have different needs and focus areas, and I think municipalities can play a big role in helping guide some of that engagement. There's also active transportation, and really, as far as active transportation goes, the municipality, most of that active transportation is going to happen in our urban centers, and or there is a little bit of overlap with the county, but largely that active transportation happens in those more dense areas. Development policies. Development happens at multiple levels of government. So the municipalities have some land use planning work to do at the municipal level. The county also has some work to do there. And I think it's important to make sure that all those policies align to achieve the goal of emissions reductions. And lastly, the conservation and demand management plans. This is a requirement under the Energy Act for all broad public sector organizations. And I know our municipalities participate and provide data in that. And those actions associated with the conservation demand management plans are important to further those climate change and greenhouse gas reductions. So that's in a nutshell what we've been working on in the last 18 months. Where we sit with this plan right now is we're preparing it to go to Planning Committee in February. The plan has been reviewed internally by staff, so we're just kind of putting the final touches on it to go to Planning Committee in February, and it will go to committee as a draft plan to give the opportunity for council to provide some comments on that plan. And all going well, we hope to take it to council later in February. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Karen, for your presentation. As we know that you can just tell by weather patterns, you know, how long it took to get an ice rink going this year in our municipality compared to previous years. You know, you could usually Years ago, I know when I was a kid, you had an ice rink outside in December, but now you don't. Questions from members of council? Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to Karen. So what are the next steps going forward with this? Is it up to each individual municipality to develop a plan, or will the county come up with a plan that's implemented across the whole county? Like, just where do we go next?
Sure, through you, Mayor Davidson. In the plan, I've included a recommendation to do a 5-year work plan to sort of lay out how the recommendations of the plan will roll out. There are some things that we can get started on right away, other things that will take some time to get up and rolling. So we want to be very strategic in the way we approach some of those recommendations, considering the time frame that we have, also considering the financials of what that means. So, so that's sort of what we have on the slate for this year. The plan is actually from 2022. So this year we'll hopefully work on some of those budget issues, get them into next year's budget, and then we'll hopefully be off and running. Yeah, I see that the county really being a facilitator to some of these items, the lead on some of these items, to get people talking and seeing where partnerships can be formed, who has interest in various items and how we're going to work together to move those forward.
It's a good question there, Councilor Douglas. Councilor Craven, you have a question?
I just wonder, is there anything individuals can do on their own other than with another group? Because is there anything we can do on our own just to help the situation?
Yes, through you, Mayor Davidson. There's a lot that individuals can do on their own. I think being aware of the energy you use, the type of energy that you use is very important. And one thing that we need to really start taking a look at is something called deep energy retrofits in our existing housing. And so that's improving, doing things like improving insulation, improving just the energy dynamics in our existing homes to make them run more efficient. Many of our homes are not, were not constructed with the current building code. So we want to bring them up to the current building code, and if we can, more efficient than what is the current standard. And that will drive down energy costs and usage, which is really what we're looking for. But another thing that the individual can do is to do research, look into climate change, talk about climate change, really start generating that conversation. And the more people that are aware, the more interest there is, there'll be more, I think, uptake in doing some of this hard work.
Thank you, Karen. I do have a question for you. So you did talk a little bit about the green building guidelines and how you're looking at it being something more and above what the provincial guidelines currently are. How do you suppose we go about that without driving development somewhere else?
Mayor Davidson, I think that's a great question. When I gathered our local industry leaders to talk about that, it was one thing that we talked about. It's one thing that's been raised as a concern from economic development as well, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. And what those leaders are seeing is that where green building guidelines are in place, the building community has supported those. And municipalities, it's sort of bled over to neighboring municipalities, and that the development industry, the construction industry is wanting to do some of these things. So it's something that we really need to be cognizant of in the way we approach the development of the guidelines. Like I said, some of these things are going to require an incentive. In many places, the green building guidelines are voluntary, and with the adoption of those guidelines by construction industry, they would see an incentive of some sort to encourage that adoption.
And just further on that then, are we also lobbying the province to change their building code to actually incorporate some of these green building guidelines?
Yeah, so my understanding is recently, and I'm sure Patty can probably has a more eloquent answer than I have, but recently the building guidelines were updated to improve efficiency of buildings by 15% over the previous building code. And my understanding from our local industry leaders are that the building code will eventually come to a net zero. I have heard even by 2030. So developing these green building guidelines can really help us transition to that ultimately net zero that is, I guess, being talked about at that 2030 timeframe.
Thank you. CBO Wright, do you have comments on that?
Karen has summed it up rather well. Yes, we're working towards net zero by 2030. So every update, so many years, they bump us up that 15% and trying to get there. We have definitely builders that are achieving well above the current standards. There's two ways to get to the standards now. One is through performance and one is through prescribed methods. And we have some builders that are going performance and they are achieving well above what's found through the prescribed method. So the industry is responding and they're using that as a selling point of the houses as that they're more efficient and therefore cheaper to service.
Thank you, CBO Wright. And I know that energy-wise, they're fantastic, but building-wise, right now, they're also more expensive to do. I know the county just did a build, and I believe it's in Arthur of social housing, and that those units are done to this type of code you're talking about, but they're also very expensive to put together. The benefits of the individuals using those places, of course, are going to be, they're going to reach, quite a bit of savings by having the pipes wrapped and everything put in place, with the proper windows and the extra installation and just how it's built. And I toured it and I was amazed at how much was put into the place to make it energy efficient. And you could be in there without the heater even on and know that it's still warm in there, which was quite interesting to me, although it was expensive to put together. Any other questions from council members at this time? Seeing none, if I can get you to stop sharing your screen, Karen. I do have a resolution here that the delegation of the County of Wellington Climate Change Coordinator be received for information. Moved by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Ottens. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thanks very much.
Moving on here, we don't have any minutes from committees. We do have item 9.1, which is a economic development. We're going to have Ally.
So through you, your mayor. So this report just really is an update on what's going on with the Economic Development Department right now. I started full-time in the position in September, so it's just updating you guys on some initiatives that we've been working through. We've really been working on our partnership with Northern Wellington, so Minto and Wellington North for quite a few initiatives, working with our joint partnership with the Chamber of Commerce here in Mapleton, and that's going very well. Some of our key things there is we're working on a joint local website that we can sell businesses gift cards for them and they'll get the money in return. This will help any residents or people that want to buy gift cards, they can buy them all at one time in one location, similar to many of the other municipalities have this website already. So we're working on that with the chamber right now. They also helped us complete, we had 51 BRNE surveys when we did our COVID recovery survey, and that was a lot of help having them join in with us for that. Another big project we're working on right now is with Minto and Wellington North on a joint jobs and housing portal. They both already have one. This was outlined in our joint project that we brought to you before. So we're really working on just getting that out and getting it forward. That should be coming in the next few months, which is great for our businesses and people looking to move to Mapleton. We're trying to keep them in Northern Wellington as much as we can. Update on our CIP program that has a great amount of uptake in it. We can see there's a lot of investment in Mapleton, and that's great to hear. And I can take any questions if there is any.
Thank you. We do have a resolution here that the Township of Mapleton Council receive Economic Development Report ED 2021-02 dated January 26, 2021 regarding Economic Development Department update. I need a mover and a seconder before any questions. Moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Ottens.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. I see the CIP for 2020-2021, that there's 4 more applications. So is there room for more yet, or have we tapped out our 2021 budget already? I guess not if there's only 4, but how many more could we possibly have?
So
Ms.
some of, yep, through your mayor, some of those are still from 2020. They just haven't been completed. So we'll still be able to expense some of it to 2020's budget. We're still pretty open for 2021 at this point. I think only one of them actually went through as a 2021 application. Some of them might have to be moved depending on how long the project takes, but I would say we still have about 3/4 of our funding still for 2021.
Thank you.
Good.
Further questions? Follow up?
Can I just just as a follow-up, do you seek out any of these, or do you wait for them to come to you? Because I'm not sure if all the businesses are aware of it. You would think they would be between newspaper and social media, but do you approach any businesses and say, hey, we've got this?
Ally?
So, yeah, through your mayor, we haven't yet. Since I've been in the position, we've had quite a bit of uptake into it. If we see anybody that has come through the building department for projects, things like that, they will let them know. If it looks like it's going a bit slower, we will be reaching out to businesses. Right now with the uptake, we don't really have that much money to give out to start seeking them out. I know prior to me being in the position, there was a walk around of the community that applications were dropped off and talked about. So if we see that it's not being taken up, we will be doing that again. We did go to the Chamber of Commerce AGM last year and speak about it, which raised quite a bit of buzz. And I think that's where some of the applications came from.
Thank you, Ally. Any other questions from council members? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. And we're going to have Ally again, I think. We have here that the Township of Mapleton Council received CAO clerk's report, the ED 2021-03 dated January 26, 2021 regarding social media strategy. And further that council approve and adopt updated policy 6.7 social media policy and strategy into the policy manual. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Craven, Councillor Douglas. All right. So Ally, go ahead.
Through you, your mayor, that should say economic development report in there. That's written in wrong. Sorry for that. So this report, when we work together with Minto through our MOU, Mapleton requested their assistance in helping us with our social media. They do have a very good social media presence. We just wanted to update and bring our social media up a bit better. So we've been working with Taylor on the Minto staff. We've created a social media policy and strategy, a response chart, a branding kit, and a metrics chart. So the policy and strategy is just a bit more all-encompassing. Our current one's pretty basic. The response chart is to make sure that we have a unified message going out to all of our residents, that we ensure when we get messages on social media, questions, things like that, we have a unified message going out from the township. The branding kit is just to make sure that we have a unified image on all our social media platforms, all our posts look similar, things like that. And the metrics is just kind of the numbers behind the scenes that we'll be coming back to council with. Can show you how many followers we've had, how many posts, things like that. And I can take any questions.
So council, we will change this then from the CEO clerk's report to economic development with your approval of the change. All right, everyone's agreed. Questions for the economic development person, Ally, then? Okay, no questions. I just got a question, Ally, when it comes to some of these taglines. Are they are they Mapleton only, or are other people from outside of Mapleton, the township of Mapleton here, also utilizing some of these taglines?
I would have to look more into that. I believe most of them are, there's a few, the Mapleton Proud, there is another in the States, there's another Mapleton. So some of them are utilized. We can kind of pick ours out from there. These ones are just our main ones. We can make up as many as we want. And we can, as I've found, we can really differentiate us from the other Mapleton in the States. But
So we're not going to be handcuffed, Ali, on the hashtags commonly used in this. We're not going to be stuck with those. We can add on without having it in the policy. Yes?
yes,
Sorry.
sorry.
Okay, sorry. I had my head down. Any other questions? All right. So all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Ali. Next, we have finance report, that resolution here that the Township of Mapleton Council received finance report FIN 2021-01 regarding property tax write-offs in 2020 as information. This is going to be moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Craven, and we will go to Mr. Morrison.
Through you, Your Worship. Just to be a little bit clear as to what we're doing here, each year council has the ability to cancel, reduce, or refund all or in part of a taxpayer's property tax based on certain specific reasons. And those reasons are mostly found in sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act. So the primary purpose of this report is to advise you as to what the results of those decisions were made. For a practical administrative point of view, you delegate that responsibility to staff to expedite the process, and it would be staff's responsibility to come back to you if there was something unusual or problematic where you really did require a decision. In my opinion, that a fire is a fact. A demolition is a fact. If there was a assessment issue where impact has made an error in terms of a fact, and the applicant is no longer able to go through minutes of settlement, we would also accept the application, and that is another fact. So none of the applications that were approved on your behalf by staff last year had anything that was very controversial. So last year, under sections 357 and 358, we wrote off about $46,000, of which a little over $13,000 is direct revenues for the municipality, and $17,800 is for the county, and the balance of $14,500 was charged to the school boards. So again, these charges are simply money that we reduced in terms of payments to the school boards of the county, and away we go. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other activities that are going on here that are not council's responsibility. Well, the biggest charge last year was a number of our residents forgot to get their farm approval done, and those applications had to be processed, and that accounted for about $80,000. That is a bit of a problem because it does impact how the tax rates are set. But again, it's something that we have to just process. And that accounted for our total write-off for the township of just over $92,000. So when you think about all these various incentives, programs, minutes of settlement, and our own decisions under 357, the tax base was reduced last year by $247,000, which means that the township's portion of that is 92,000. The county's portion is over 119,000, and just under 35,000 represents the various school boards. I hope that's a little bit clear. I believe that the report may have been somewhat confusing.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I was going to ask you about that 247,000. You just clarified that for me, so I don't have that question. Questions from members of council? I don't see any, Mr. Morrison. You must have cleared up everybody's questions. Oh, Councillor Craven.
Through you to John, is that a fairly normal? We used to get this amount on every pretty much every meeting. Is that a fairly normal amount for the write-offs, or is it a change?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe that the province made an administrative change in which the farming community would have to apply for its farming designation. That's created a bit of confusion. A number of them forgot to get their applications there in time. And as a result, the write-offs this year in terms of getting them into the proper classification is a little higher than we would normally see. Hopefully, they will start to get into the normal course of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. We did talk about that, the county finance committee as well, because it is something that's not just here in Mapleton, not just here in the county, but it's province-wide. They did make that change. So, other questions? Seeing none, then I will ask all those in favor. It's moved. Next we have here item 9.2.2. 9.2.2. The Township of Mapleton Council received finance report FIN 2021-02 dated January 26, 2021 regarding the 2021 interim property tax levy. And further, that council approved bylaw 2021 draft being an interim tax bylaw. Moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens. Mr. Morrison.
Through you, Your Worship, this is a problem that predates all of us. It's a problem well before any one of us were born, and it's a difficult problem to solve. What the report is trying to do, though, is basically develop a mathematical formula for the correct pricing as we move forward in time, trying to ensure that we can build the care and maintenance fund so that it can actually provide greater contributions to the cemetery operations, because currently it's providing very little.
Hang on, Mr. Morrison. We're actually talking about the interim property tax levy.
Oh, sorry.
Interim tax bylaw.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's a stand. I was.
You're one ahead.
So the interim property tax levy is a standard report. It can review with standard terms. You can review the due dates. Is pretty close to when we would have to provide the installments to the upper tier and to the school boards.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. And Mr. Morrison, how do we come about with the 50%? Is that something that's just historical? It's always been 50%?
It's found in the municipal act that we are encouraged to charge 50% of the prior year levy, until which time we know what the new levy is, and then we charge that one. So the interim is usually 50%. We cannot charge the amounts going forward until the county has finished with its tax policies, and the province has set all the educational tax levies. So basically, we're kind of waiting for 50% of the prior year levy. At this point, long ago, we would take the new assessment and just use 50% of the, in 50% of the year of last year's tax rates. But that caused a bit of a problem because people were feeling we were taking too much money up front. So the province more or less set it as 50% of the prior year levy, to be very precise.
Thank you, sir. Further questions? Mr. Morrison? Seeing none, all those in favor of this? That's carried. All right, now we get into the next one. And this one here is that the Township of Mapleton Council received finance report FIN 2021-03 regarding cemetery service fee adjustments, and that council approved the proposed changes to the fee and charges bylaw, Schedule C, cemeteries, attached as an appendix to this report with an effective date of March 1st, 2021. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Craven. Thank you. Mr. Morrison, now you can go ahead.
Apologize for that earlier kerfuffle. Again, as I was saying, this problem predates us, and what we're trying to accomplish here is a mathematical formula so that we're moving forward in time. It will be rational over time. It probably will not place our fees out of reach of any of our neighbors and our direct competitors in the municipal world. The fees are still far lower than the private sector. And as you can see from the comparables in the report that we found, we're probably one of the lowest in the county. The fee for the sale of the interment rights to the plot fees will remain unchanged throughout 2021. And then we're hoping to phase it in at 10% a year until we've reached the point where if we were to come again, we would now have a mathematical approach to justify it. 10 years it will take to phase this in. As I said, it probably more than 100 years to create the problem in the first place. So it's not something we're going to be able to solve overnight. Unfortunately, if we don't, you have significant issues with respect to the taxpayer support. I've been asked and I've reviewed, I believe that currently the taxpayers are on averaging for the prior 5 years been supporting the operations by at least $37,000 per year, and that includes our transfers to our reserves, which is building our capital reserve account. So it is a complex issue. It requires a lot of thought, and it's intergenerational, and it's emotionally difficult for the council to deal with. So I'm prepared to answer any questions.
So we'll open it up for questions then to Mr. Morrison. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Morrison, do we actually track our maintenance costs, or are they just assigned salaries to a line item?
Morrison.
Through you, your worship, our payroll does assign actual costs to the maintenance activity. Our payroll coordinator there spends hours going through the timesheets, figuring out how many different departments need to be assigned a cost to this department or that department. Other charges are incurred that are logical and rational to be charged to the cemetery operations. So it is a detailed accounting of the operations.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Mr. Craven.
So there would be an amount, you would know what an amount would be for grass cutting at the two cemeteries, eh?
Mr. Morrison.
They don't they don't measure that we don't measure the specific work order activity. What we measure is the time spent that labor has been deployed to the cemeteries and any materials that have been used by the cemeteries. We're just introducing a work order system that eventually could potentially break it down if it was deemed important that we break down how much money it costs to cut just grass. But cemetery maintenance fees, again, is more than just cutting the grass. It's maintaining the plots, it's maintaining the buildings, it's maintaining the road network through the system. It's maintaining a lot of different things that have to go into the maintenance of the cemetery.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I think it's very clear that we're tracking the hours used, but we're not tracking materials per se, or the equipment or the repairs to the equipment's being used at the cemetery. Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Your Worship. John, just for clarification, there was an email sent not long ago. That's the expenses you're referring to, correct?
The email that was sent to the councillors a little while ago is the actual GL accounts for the operating of funds, revenue and expenditures for Drayton and Holland and other smaller cemeteries that we are required to maintain. So they are the direct labor that was expensed. It was direct materials that was expensed. And any other equipment charge that we had to incur was also expensed into those categories as well as the reserve. So when councillors have the moment or time and to review that 5-year trend, so they will see that through the years 2015 through 2019, taxpayers have been supporting the operation on average of $37,000 each year. And the balance of the funds for the cemetery from the sale, the reserve and reserve funds are going into the trust fund. And the trust fund is a separate account. It's found in our audit financial statements. If they want to know what the balance is, go to our website, download our financial statements, and there's a whole section that the auditors have kept separate so that they can see exactly what revenues were raised, and they'll see that there's been no expenditures because it hasn't been worthwhile to deploy any expenditures to offset the operations.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Councillor Ottens?
Yes, thank you. Through Your Worship. I don't dispute we need to raise our fees to some level because I don't think it's been done enough in the past on a regular basis. But it's my understanding that the care and maintenance of a cemetery, when you have this in perpetuity, is that they're assuming that the cemetery at one point will close. So there's no more income coming into it. And that's why we need to have this higher amount coming in initially to help pay for that. But our cemetery is not going to close anytime in the future. We're just going to keep expanding it. And again, I'll say once that columbarium is there, then you can get a lot more people in a lot less space. And so you don't need as much cemetery space going forward. So I guess my question is, and perhaps I see that Ken Thompson is on here as well, and he might be able to say something about that, because I thought it was more, this care and maintenance was more for cemeteries that close, not for ones that continually stay open and keep generating more revenue from sales. So I guess I need a little more information in that area.
Through you, Your Worship, do you want me to answer that question?
Go ahead, Ms. Morrison.
The care and maintenance fund is for the care and maintenance of the cemetery. It could be used today for our operations. It could be used at any time and for any reason, as long as it's prescribed in legislation. There's nothing stopping us from using the money now to offset the operations for the taxpayers. The only reason we have not done so is just not practical to do so, because we're collecting the money so slowly from the sales. You know, we had a great year in 2020 when the Mennonite group bought those 280 sites. But in a typical year, we only sell 10. And when you're selling only 10 sites a year and 1 or 2 cremation lots, you're not going to build the fund sufficiently large enough to require to be able to use any of that money to offset the operation. So the taxpayer is in essence continuing to have to fund it year after year after year, because the money isn't there to collect in the first place. And we can't expand the cemetery operations either, because we're going to run out of money once we finish the columbarium. You've got another project a few years down the road for another $79,000 in the 10-year capital program that we just approved, and we have left it for the next council to determine whether they wish to increase the reserve from 5 to, I think it's going to be, or to $15,000 per year. So again, we're adding taxpayer pressure if we don't start adjusting the rates moving forward now.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. A follow-up? Councillor Robbins?
I guess you mentioned the columbarium is for the next council, but it's my understanding it was moved into 2022, which would put it.
I'm sorry, there was 2 projects in the 10-year capital program. The $60,000 that would move forward, the reserves can finance today. That project can happen. But there's another second phase for $79,000 a few years from now that will require us to build the reserves that will put the pressure on the taxpayers, because we have to therefore charge the reserves so that the reserve balance will go up.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Other questions from members of council? Just checking first, Councillor Ottens, if anybody else has a question. Councillor Douglas or Councillor Craven, you have a question? Councillor Craven?
I do, but Marlene, go ahead and answer hers first. Ask hers first.
No, Councillor Craven, I'm giving you your opportunity right now. Councillor Ottens already asked a few.
Through you to John, then. John, starting next year, you're looking at a 10% increase per year for 10 years. Wouldn't it be practical to look at a 2% or 5% instead of 10?
Mr. Morrison?
Again, you're just spreading it out. I don't think it'd be very practical. You're not reaching a critical point in the fee structure. I mean, look, the fees have to go up. Nobody wants to see the fees go up to punish the current plot purchasers or the current people seeking rights for interment. But if we don't start now increasing the fees in a rational and responsible way, I'm not sure you're ever going to be able to make your master plan come to life unless you decided that the taxpayers should be paying for it. That's a choice. I believe that even after 10 years, when you see what would happen through the 10 years, we're not going to be out of whack with the rest of the county. You know, it will be 4 or 5 years before we start to edge up, but in those years, they're going to be raising their fees as well. And even at the 10-year mark, there are a lot of cemeteries out there charging double what those fees are. And a lot of people are going to go to those cemeteries as well for one reason or another. So I'm not sure that trying to slow this down even further is practical at all. We're still going to see we're going to have trouble raising the money for the master plan. We're still not going to be building the reserves and perpetuity so that we could even look after them without having our children pay for it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison and Mr. Craven. I do understand where you're going with that, sir. And possibly or probably had this been done over the years before us, we wouldn't be in a position now where we have to raise the fees. Now we're in the position where we have to raise the fees. And I'll just remind council that we did actually pass a bylaw last year that we were raising the fees to $22.50 in 2021. That was brought back to council. We reconsidered. That's where we're at now after discussions between Mr. Barron, Mr. Morrison, and some residential influencers. This is where we come up with this 10% per year. Mr. Barron?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you. Yeah, so exactly my point. When we talked about that, we approved it, then we put a pause. And literally with COVID and Zoom and things like that, and everybody being busy, we did commit to re-looking at the fees, which we've done. We also committed to working with the local funeral home to making sure that the bylaw makes sense and is workable for everybody. And the third thing that we committed to is re-looking at the master plan and coming up with a recommendation. So we've talked about the rates. We're hoping to book a meeting with the bylaw with Mary and Ken this week to go over the bylaw. And then after that's complete and agreed upon, we are going to look at the master plan and see what needs to be changed with the master plan, and in creating a go forward plan to present to council that not only works for council, not only works for the public, but works for heritage funeral homes as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. But we just need a little bit more time to kind of hash that out and a little bit more communication with the parties.
Thank you, Councilor Douglas.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if it would be prudent to implement the first 2 years of the plan and then defer the remainder for the next term of council. Just wondering, how does that work if we institute a 10% increase per year through another term?
Councilor, Mr. Morrison.
Through you, Your Worship, what would happen in practice is that we would come back next year and say, you've already agreed to do this, can you do this? And you would have to say, we would do this through the fees and charges bylaw. So every year you would approve the fees and charges bylaw with the schedule. And if any councillor were to object to that increase in that particular year, we'd be having this discussion again.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. As council knows, every year we go over the fees and charges bylaw. So at any particular time, we can make that change. Although in the plan right now, it shows it over a 10-year plan, any term of council can change that plan further down the road.
That's right.
We're just trying to put in place a plan of action that is going to help in the long run. Councillor Ottens, you had another question.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Mr. Morrison that the 10% per year is prudent at this point, and it will eventually, the comparators will catch up to us or we to them, however it works. I'd like to point out too that the columbarium will in no way cost the amount that we have set aside for it, based on other ones that we've seen in neighboring municipalities. We could get 3 times that for the amount we have budgeted. So that does leave some money in reserves once that project is completed.
I thought we were doing ours in gold.
Well, sounds like it at that price.
Well, I'd rather have money that's higher than not enough than have to come back and look for it. So if we end up with extra funding, that is actually good for the township instead of coming back and looking for money. Further questions from members of council? I don't see any. So we do have that. Let me read it again for you here. that the Township of Mapleton Council receive finance report FIN 2021-03 regarding cemetery fee, service fee adjustments, and that council approve the proposed changes to the fees and charges bylaw, Schedule C, cemeteries, attached as an appendix to this report with an effective date of March 1st, 2021. All those in favor?
Just
That is carried. Thank you. Moving on, we now go to item 9.3. This is that Council of the Township of Mapleton receive as information report number SWP 2021-01 dated January 26, 2021 regarding environmental registry number 019-017, proposed implementation of updates to Ontario's water quality management framework. And we have Kyle with us today about this. And Kyle, you're on.
Thank you very much, Mayor Davidson. Pleased here to present this summary to council. If council recalls, this is an update to a previous report I presented back in the fall. The province has been busy over the last 6 months. This report is providing council the opportunity to review and consider and provide comment on the newest regulatory proposal posted on the Environmental Registry related to the implementation of the Ontario Water Quantity Framework. The proposed changes include a priority of use framework, area management of stressed areas, data publication, and revocation of the interim water bottling technical guidance. This posting, as well as the previous postings in June and October of 2020, are related to the expiry of the water bottling moratorium that is currently set to expire on April 1st, 2021. If council would recall, the water quantity management framework that was posted back in the summer established 4 goals to improve water quantity management in Ontario. These goals are listed in the report and are as follows: establishing clear provincial priorities of water use, update our approach to managing water takings in stressed areas, making water taking data more accessible, and giving host municipalities more input into water bottling decisions. The October report dealt with Goal 4, which has since been passed into law by the province. So there is now a legal requirement and a legal process for host municipalities to provide resolutions of support or resolutions not in support of water bottling operations, new or expanding water bottling operations. This report is dealing with goals 1, 2, and 3, and as follows. So goal 1 was priorities of use, and in the proposed guidance, the province is proposing a 4-tier category, or 4 categories of priority of use. The first priority is drinking water, and that includes private drinking water wells, as well as municipal drinking water wells, as well as livestock watering, and it also includes consumption of water or use of water for ecological purposes, so maintenance of stream flow, fish habitat, things of that nature. So that is category 1, priority 1. Priority 2 are the other farm uses, so irrigation of crops, on-farm water use, things of that nature. Category 3 is the industrial commercial category, and that does include golf courses as well as water bottlers and concrete plants and as such. And then 4 is the aesthetic category. The other aspect of this guidance document is the area management for stressed areas. So the province is proposing a new process under the Ontario Water Resources Act that will allow the province, specifically the Minister of Environment Director, responsible for permit to take water. So for us, they sit in Hamilton, give them the ability to develop a water taking management strategy in areas where they feel the area is stressed. So they generally outline what they feel a stressed area would be, and it is one of our comments is noting that it's not necessarily the same as a wellhead protection area for quantity under the Clean Water Act. That is one of the factors they'd look at, but they would also look more broadly at things like ecosystem health, low water events in surface water streams, fishery impact, wetland impacts, things of that nature. The guidance document outlines the process that would be followed, which would include extensive consultation with all the different stakeholders, both public and agency and municipality, and Indigenous groups, and then also talks about the process on how to manage that strategy and update the strategy going forward. So there's definitely a lot of links that I see with this process and the wellhead protection area quantity process that we've talked about in the past. So we've provided some initial comments. The comment period doesn't close till February 5th. We wanted to get in front of council without a full set of comments, just so that council would have the opportunity to review it. Overall, we're supportive of these proposed amendments that will advance the implementation of the water quantity framework and provide better overall water resource protection and integrate well with source protection. We have a few early comments related to the wellhead protection integration with the Source Protection Act, as well as some comments in regards to how they're wording the provision of data as it pertains to Goal 3. I would be happy to take any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Questions from members of council after I get a mover and a seconder for that. Mover, Paul, seconder, Marlene. Okay, Dennis, go ahead.
Through you to Kyle. Kyle, would if somebody came along and wanted to bottle water and sell it from Mapleton Township, would we be wise to say no, or would we have enough water to be able to do some of that?
Mr. Davis.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. That would certainly be something we would have to be considered carefully. There would need to be studies that the proponent would provide that would have to be reviewed by professional geoscientists, professional engineers to really kind of formulate kind of a staff position on whether or not council should support it or not support it. There's a process in place that council would be able to issue a resolution of support or a resolution not in support, depending on what they wish to do. But really, it would depend on the individual applications, where those applications are located, especially in relation to our municipal wells and other private wells.
Further questions? Seeing none, thanks, Kyle, for coming on today and giving us this information, very important information, and we look forward to your next report on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
All those in favor? That's carried. Next, we have item number 10, approval of bylaws. And that the bylaws numbered 2021-008 and 2021-009 be hereby read a first, second, and third time, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal, moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens. Any questions on those? Then all those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to item 10. Hang on a second while I find it. There we have correspondence for council's information there. We have 3 pieces of information there. Any questions, comments on that information? All right. Notice of motion. We have the notice of provision there regarding the surplus lands. Any other business tonight or today, this afternoon? Seeing none. We do have a confirmatory bylaw before we go into our closed session. And the mover and seconder that the bylaw number 2020-010 being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of the council of the corporation of the Township of Mapleton be hereby read a first, second, and third time, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal, moved by Councillor Douglas and Councillor Otten seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. And lastly, we have a closed session That the Township of Mapleton Council move into closed session for the following reasons: review of closed session minutes, December 8th, 2020, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality and labor relations or employee negotiations. Moved by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Douglas. All those in favor? That's carried. We will take 10 minutes and then come into closed.
Bye, everyone.
See you, Sam.
See ya. Bye-bye. Thank you.
And Ricardo, look at you. You get your hair cut, Rickard? Look at that. Looks like you got a haircut.